at a 5100 kilobyte bit rate. It's going to put the CPU under about 50% load. This CPU has been clocked as high as 4.8, but where its main focus right now is mining. It sits idle. It's at 4 gigahertz native, and generally uses about 2 watts of power while it's mining. The CPU itself is using about 2 watts with all power efficiency turned on. I get those numbers not from the amp clamp, but from when I had it in ASUS's motherboard, the Crosshair 5 motherboard. Using AI Suite allows you to see how many watts your CPU is using, and you can see it in real time. As your loads fluctuate, you can see it jump all the way up. They quit measuring it at 99 for some reason, and basically if you're running it at 1.52 volts, which is 1.525 is about the limit of what you're going to be able to cool with a water-cooled system, unless you have a ton of radiators and you are feeding it 70-degree Fahrenheit water, not Celsius. You may be able to efficiently cool it, maybe up to almost 1.54. I don't think you'd be able to go much over 1.54 without more exotic cooling. Depending on which, the binding process on yours, on which one you got, you may be able to get 5.1 out of it, 5.2, just depends. Mine, this one's not that great, and it really tops out its peak stability around 4.9. Back to the water cooling system. To combat that, the hot water, 62-degree water to the processor, out of my second pump, I ran this line right here, directly from the pump, which sits on the back of the reservoir, right into that radiator. And that radiator is like a pre-cooler. It cools down the water, and then through this line here, the water goes to the processor. After it goes to the processor, then it comes out of the processor and comes down to these 2 video cards here. Then it comes up through here, goes to the radiator in the front of the case right here, out of this radiator, back into the reservoir. What that got me was my changes dropped. The CPU is now running right about 50 degrees Celsius, 51 degrees. We had 11 degrees Celsius drop on the CPU temperature. And all of the video cards themselves dropped about 11 degrees too. They're all running right about 60 degrees now. Pretty cool. It worked out very well. I don't normally have the case open like this. I took the case off. Probably look better if I put a couple grills on there or something to cover up those ugly ass holes. But that's with the case cover on. That's the temperatures we're getting out of it. Oh yeah, a couple other things. Using the new power supply has some cool features. There is 7 power rails on it, count them up, 7 of them. That ends up putting every card on its own power rail, and you have one split between the motherboard and the CPU. You can do dual CPUs. I think that's what the original intention for this power supply was. It was a dual CPU system, a plus 4 video cards. If you do that, that's going to tap every one of your rails. Or you can do one 12-volt rail to run all the shit, the fans, the motherboard, the processor, the water pumps, and then the other 5 rails. So maybe there's only 6, I'm not sure. And you run the other 5 rails, 1 on each video card, everyone having its own power. It works fantastic. The power supply, the ribbon cables kind of, or the power cables, excuse me, the power cables kind of rock. They're a flat cable, as you see here. They're not the round, hard to move, hard to bend cables. They're flat cables. Made it rather easy to get most of them into place, at least for the PCI devices, the PCIe devices. The cables going to the motherboard and to this power of the CPU, those are traditional bundled round with mesh around them cables. It was a little bit hard getting those in place. had to do a little modifications to get the video cards to fit right here. Their end is actually poking out the bottom of the case. They sit in there perfect though, and they're nice and tight and secure in place. No problems there. The thing does, it fits. The video cards are touching these water tubes here and kind of pushing on them just a little bit. It's working perfect because it holds everything, or it helps to hold everything in place. Couple things. This power supply, because it can draw so much power, they gave it a different power cable. It does not use the standard power cable that's used on, say, every other power supply I've ever seen. Theirs is a bigger, fatter one that has straight pins in it, which I bought some special ones. It does come with a 14 gauge cable. By the way, the reason they did that is if you have a power supply that's capable of drawing, 15 amps, or 17 amps, somewhere around there, you can't be running it through a regular power cable. You're gonna start the cable on fire. You're gonna trip a breaker. You're gonna start your house on fire, whatever. So you start pulling more current, more amps through a wire. You need a bigger gauge wire. So this is a 14 gauge that it comes with. Next thing on power supplies. Watch your efficiency. I live in a place that's power's cheap. I pay 5.9 cents a kilowatt hour. Lots of people aren't as fortunate, and they're paying 18 cents a kilowatt hour if you're on the East Coast of California. When you start loading the power supplies to their 100% capacity, their efficiency drops, and drops substantially. Ideally, you would have a power supply loaded to about 60% of its capacity, which, if you look at their efficiency charts, is where they take their readings, about 60% roughly in there, and that's where you get your peak efficiency out of it. Less than that, you're not hitting the numbers. You're not 93 or 94% as it's rated. You're 90%. This power supply, when it's at 100%, if you're running it off 120 volts, is 89% efficient, giving it a gold rating. The same power supply is sold in Europe. Exact same auto switch. It has a different orbit on it, and it's actually rated at 93% efficient over there, making it a platinum power supply. And the difference is when you start feeding it from two different lines, you gain some efficiency. Whereas in America, we run standard a neutral line with one hot wire for our regular house current. You do have options to get a 240 volt, which is what a lot of America has, at least for residential, depending on where you're going to get it from. Heaters are a good place to get it if you want to know what you're doing, or hire somebody to do it that does know what they're doing. You can hijack the power from most of the time from a thermostat, or from the heater itself. If you have, and I'll show you, baseboard heaters, you can easily tap into them at the end where the wires come, disconnect the wires from the heater so the heater cannot come on. Make sure you know what you're doing before you do this. Run some MC cable, which is basically flexible cable. It's flexible metal conduit. Run that, and you'll be able to run your power supply on 240 volts, giving you an increase of several, 3% efficiency. 3% doesn't add up over a day, but over 2 years or 3 years of mining, that adds up into pretty good money. Heat, it's the one thing that can be an obstacle, but I think it's probably the most over talked about out of everything. They talk about efficiency. Well, you got to think about it. I know engineers that work here for the government at the National Laboratory, which is 35 miles away, and they joke and laugh at all the advertisements to turn your lights off in your house. It's stupid if you live in a northern climate. the reason is any electricity used in your house, I mean, unless you're turning it into radio waves, it turns into heat. So it's not like it's lost. It turns into heat. Now the heat in the northern climates is a good thing for the winter. In the summer, it's not so good since you're removing it through your air conditioning. I'm an HVAC technician by trade, so I deal with this on a daily basis. For places that heat with electric, I could have a 1500 watt heater plugged in here and doing the same thing. The only thing is using my computers as my heater, which I have almost completely done this winter. The power doesn't cost me shit. I get it back in digital currency. So I'm essentially heating my house for free, and all the while I'm earning